Welcome to another episode of Operation SN-101, Hacks, Tips, Tricks, and Shenanigans for ServiceNow developers. What we're going to do today is show you how on a standard ServiceNow form we can create a form banner with some DOM manipulation. We're going to walk through that process. The first thing we're going to need to do is make sure that your scoped application has the capability to do DOM manipulation. And the way we make sure that happens is to create a system property within the scope that tells the system to not block DOM manipulation. So let's do that. There is a system property that tells the system whether or not to block DOM manipulation, referred to as client globals. So let's go check that out now. Let's go into our sys properties list. And in the name field, let's search for any name that has the value containing glide.script.block.client.globals. Now that we've searched to find any system property that has, again, glide.script.block.client.globals in the name field, we can see that we already have a handful of these. The first thing I'll point out is the globally scoped one, the one that is globally scoped, has a value of true. What that's telling us is for globally scoped applications, DOM manipulation is being prevented. But for all of these other scoped applications, DOM manipulation is being allowed. So normally, if I didn't find one, I can see that for the current application stylish dashboards, I have one. I would click the new button and fill out all the necessary fields. So let me open up the one that applies to my current scope. And you can see that all I have to do is put in glide.script.block.client.globals in the suffix, and the system automatically prepends the scope to that suffix, telling the system that this system property applies to this scope. And these properties are of type true-false. And for those scopes where you want to allow DOM manipulation, the value needs to be false. So that's what we do. We create a system property that has that suffix that's a true-false type that has a value of false. So that's step one. Make sure your scope can, in fact, manipulate the DOM. So the next thing we need to do is to create a field that will allow us to manipulate the DOM that the system creates around that field on the form so that it can become our banner. Follow along. That might be kind of hard to understand, but let's just walk through the process. So I have a table called My Happy Case that I've created already. The one thing I don't have is a field where I want to be able to use the DOM that surrounds that field as my banner. So first things first, let's go back and look at My Happy Cases. So here's a list of My Happy Case records. I'm going to open up the first one, and you can see standard ServiceNow form. I've organized it so my number field is up here, the assigned to field, active, priority, state, a short description, and a description field, and work notes. So what I'm trying to do on this form is above all these fields have a banner that goes the entire width of the form And in that banner, I want it to be styled using CSS. And I want the value in that banner to be a combination of the short description and the display value of the person in the assigned to field. So that's what we're going to do. The first thing I need to do is create a field that will create DOM elements that I'm going to use to create the banner. So let's go into the IDE, and I'm going to create a field called form banner. And to make sure it behaves the way I want, it's going to be a string field, and I'm going to give it a maximum characters of 225 to make sure that it's a single row field. It probably doesn't make much difference because I'm going to steal the size anyways. So again, a form banner, and I'm naming it form banner because I'm using this ID when I find the DOM that contains this field. If you want to name this anything else, you'll just have to know that whatever you give for, again, the column name, the database use of the column, that's the ID that you're looking for. So again, form banner, form underscore banner, it's a string type, 225 characters max. I'm going to go ahead and update my table. So now that I've updated my table, I'm going to go back to my case record, and I'm going to reload my case record. When you do, you can see that ServiceNow automatically adds the form banner field to the bottom. Well, I don't want my form banner to be at the bottom of my form, I want it to be at the top. So I'm going to edit this by going configure form design. And there's a couple of things I need to do to make sure that the form banner is the entire width of the form. The first thing you'll notice when ServiceNow creates forms is it creates this 2-column section at the top. I need this to be a single column, but I want these other fields to stay in a 2-column. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create another 2-column section, and I'm going to remove this new section title so it doesn't appear as a new tab on the form. And then I'm just going to drag all the fields down here that I want to be below my form banner. Okay, now that I have all these 2-column fields below it, I'm going to change this to a single column. I'm going to move my form banner field to the top. So again, all I've done is created a new section with no title, 2-column section, moved all my original 2-column fields down into this new 2-column section, created a 1-column section, and dragged my form banner field up there. Now I'll save. Okay, now that I've saved the form design, let's go back to the actual fields on the form, and let's reload the form. So here's what we're going to see. We now have a form banner field at the top. And again, this is here just so that I can use the DOM that gets created to hold this field in place. What do I mean by that? Let's take a peek using DevTools to see that. So let's do an inspect. And I'm going to go ahead and find this up here. And when I do that, you can see right above the actual title and the somewhere in here is the hidden input field, right? You can see the input here. But all of this information is contained in this overall div element that has an ID of label.scope.table.form banner. So what this is saying is this div element, everything inside from here to here is the div element that I want to take everything that's in there and replace it with the value that I want. So we're going to walk through how to do that. So again, normally ServiceNow won't allow you using jQuery to actually get the full label, the full ID. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for an ID that contains dot form underscore banner. And that's because form underscore banner is the column name for that new field that I created. So I'm going to look for form underscore banner. So just a quick recap. We've created the system property that allows us to do DOM manipulation. We created a new field that's going to allow us to use the DOM that surrounds that field. And we've moved that field to the top of our form, so that's going to be the position for our banner. So now we've got to write the code to do all of this. So again, as a reminder, I want the value that I show in the banner to be a combination of the short description, the word for, and the display value of assigned to. So let's go into our IDE and do that. So first thing I need to do is I want to be able to get the value of the assigned to, but not the sys ID because it's a reference field, but I want the actual display value. Can't do that in a client script, so I'm going to create a display business rule first. So let's do that first. Create application file, serve development business rule. Wait for it to load. So here I'm going to say my happy case, just so I can find this in my list of artifacts. My happy case. Get assigned to display value. And it's on my happy case table. And I want the advanced so that I can use my advanced scripting. And the when to run is display. And if you're not familiar with the display business rule, a display business rule runs every time a form loads. So in my advanced, all I want to do here is get the display value for the assigned to field, and I'm going to associate it with a G scratchpad variable so I can get access to it in my client script. I already have the code written, so I'm just going to copy it out and drop it in here. So here's my code. Again, I'm assigning the current get display value of the assigned to field to an assigned to display value variable, and then I'm assigning that to a G scratchpad dot assigned to display value variable. That way, whenever this form loads, this G scratchpad assigned to display value is available for me on the client side script. Let me just go ahead and submit this. So that's step one, and that's a way that ServiceNow allows you to get values like this that you typically can't get on a client script, and any values that are in a record that aren't displaying the field on the form. So let's go back to the form. Let's say on this form, the short description for some reason wasn't being displayed on the form. Well, we could use a display business rule to get the short description value, put it in a scratchpad, and then it's available on the client side. Think of it as kind of session variables that go across between server side and client side. So again, that's step one, is to be able to get that display value. The next thing is now writing an onload client script that when the my happy case form loads, it creates the value that I want to show in the banner, and then does some DOM manipulation to get the div that contains all of that new field's information and replace it with the value that we want, and then style it with CSS. So let's do that. Let's create an onload client script. And we're going to, again, give it the my happy case. Actually, now that I see that, let's go back and name this MHC for my happy case. And I'll go back here and say my happy case. And we're going to say create and populate form banner. We're going to say it's the my happy case table, and this is an on load client script. So I have this already written that I'm going to drop in here, starting with the description. So first thing I want to put in here for anybody looking at this later is some information about this. When case form loads, grab the DOM element that holds the form banner and add CSS via jQuery to create a banner-like visual. The important part to remember here is for scoped apps must have the property set to allow for DOM manipulation, which is scope.glide.script.blocks.client.globals. So that's the first thing. Now in here we have to drop in the code that does all the work for us. So I've already written that code, so let me go grab that code. So we'll replace the function onload message or comment with my code. So let's walk through the code and what's going on here. Let's make this full screen. So when the page loads, the function onload kicks in. Now I need to get the value of the assigned to display value. And you can see that when I created it here in my display business role, I've associated the G-Scratchpad variable with the value of the assigned to. So all I'm doing now is this gives me the ability to get that value and assign it locally inside of the client script. Next thing is I want to actually build the form banner value itself that's going to show up in the banner. So if you remember, I wanted to have it start with short description, the word for, and then the display value of the assigned to person. So all I'm doing here is I'm getting the value from gform get value of the short description, concatenating to that the word for, and then concatenating to that the assigned display value. And that's how I get my overall value that I want to show up in the banner. This, if you're going to use this, is where you would have to figure out what data you want to put in your banner and then get that value however necessary. Then I call a method or a function called create and populate banner, and I pass to that the form banner value that I just created. These are some comments to kind of help anybody looking at this understand what's going on. So here's my create and populate banner where I'm passing in the form banner value. And this is where the ID in this jQuery is important to talk about. So the way we get this ID, or the way we get the div element where the ID contains form banner, and let me go back to the form and take a peek at that again. So let's look at our DOM again. So again, up here, the div that's holding all of this in is this div. I think this is it. Let me make sure. Yeah, it's this div class all the way through here. You get to ID and it's label.scope.table.form banner. So we want this div element because we're going to replace everything in this div element with the value of the form banner. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to look for this div value, and if you notice, normally ServiceNow doesn't allow you, or jQuery doesn't allow you to get this entire ID. So what I'm using is the jQuery's capability to look for an ID that has something contained in it, and for our use it's going to be the .form_banner. So keep that in mind as you go back to the code. So that's what this line here, jQuery show me the div where the ID contains .form banner. And once I have that, then we're going to add some CSS styling to it. And here I'm adding a border radius, font size, font weight, background color, the color of the font, the height of the banner, and then a padding inside and around the text to make it look right. These are values that you would have to play with depending on how you want your banner to look. And then the last thing we're going to do is in that div element, we're going to add .text of the form banner value. And what this is going to do is this is going to essentially replace everything within that element, that div element, that has the ID containing .form_banner. And now that we've created this, let's go ahead and save this. So again, recap, this is an onload client script for the MyHappyCase table. When it loads, I need to get the assigned to value from the scratch pad, which came from the display business rule. Then I want to build my banner value by getting the current value on the form of short description, concatenating the word for and then the assigned to display value. Then I call my function and pass that new banner value. And then here, jQuery, let me maximize this. jQuery gets that DOM element that contains form_banner, adds CSS, and then replaces all the text with inside the div element with the form banner value. Now, if all worked out, if I go back over here now and I'll hide my dev tools, now if I refresh this, and sometimes I need to do a control F5 to refresh the cache too, but if I refresh this, what I expect is this field to go away and it to be replaced with short description for Whiskey Foxtrot. So let's try it by refreshing the browser. Okay, so now that I've refreshed my browser, you can see a couple of things. One, obviously we've got the banner up here, and the banner contains everything that was inside the short description, the word for, and the display value now, instead of the sysid, of this user in the assigned to field. So what happened behind the scenes? Let's take a look at the dev tools again to see what's going on. So if I do an inspect now, and I go up here and I highlight this div element, you're going to see that this div element now has a style associated with it, and that's from that jQuery that we did. And then inside the div element, the form field and the label and everything that used to be there actually was replaced with that value that we created inside of the onload client script. So that's basically it. That shows us a way to use DOM manipulation to take values from a record, create a CSS-styled form banner at the top of any normal ServiceNow form. So thanks again for watching this episode of Operation SN 101, Hacks, Tips, Tricks, and Shenanigans for ServiceNow developers.